and that presence of love is available to everyone everywhere without asking. It's there. It already is.
Welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast, where we unwrap your favorite songs and the stories, secrets, and worldviews of the artists who write them. I'm your host, Kristi York Wooten, and this week we're launching our Recast Edition of the podcast featuring my recent interview with Grammy-winning singer Amy Grant for Georgia Public Broadcasting. I'm happy for everyone to hear this interview on the Sweet Song Podcast. Many of us grew up in the South hearing Amy Grant as a voice of reason in Christian music and as a pop star who hit #1 with Baby Baby and since has continued to blend faith, rock, pop, and Americana with her inimitable voice. Amy's here to talk about her latest album, The Me That Remains, as well as her creative process, the influence of her Southern roots, and the power of music to foster connection and healing after her heart surgery and a bicycle accident. This is the Sweet Song Podcast. Welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast, everyone. I'm Kristi York Wooten, your host, and I'm so glad to finally sit down with Amy Grant. We're going to talk about resilience and vulnerability and her latest album. And here we are. I think the key thing that I've been seeing is this term resilience being used to talk about what the music represents on the new album and just kind of where you are. But I wanted to flip that question over to you and ask about sort of how brave it is to be vulnerable, which I think when you were writing about how much vulnerability to show, after everything you've been through in the last 7 or 8 years with your health.
Well, just for starters, I didn't really realize I was making a record. And so I was just writing as therapy. And then at some point, I was writing quite a bit. And at some point I thought, hey, I would love to go in the studio and record some of these. I hadn't done that, except for not even a handful of times, just a one-off song, in well over a decade. And I thought it would just be fun. And so I reached out to Mac McAnally, and he and I were working on a song together. So we'd been trading voicemails for a few months. And I said, any chance in the new year, 2025, we could go in the studio and just record a couple of songs? But it wasn't like I've got a record deal. He never signed a producer contract. He said, yeah, let me hire a group of guys. And we did 2 songs and had so much fun. I was like, and I just kept going, I forgot how much fun it is to record music, because it takes everybody's lifetime of practice and working on their talent, working on their craft. And then you play one of your songs, ding, 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 and you toss it out to 5 or 6 really exquisite musicians, and you just watch this masterpiece emerge. And I kept saying, this is so much fun. He said, Amy, if music's not fun, something is wrong with the world. 6 weeks went by and I said, I've got more songs. Can we go back in the studio? And so all of it was just like, I felt compelled to continue recording, but I was never thinking, how are these songs coming across? I was never thinking I was actually making a record. And it was after the 3rd day of recording, and one happened in January, one happened in March, one happened in April. And then Mac said, hey, we've got 10 songs. Like, we got a record if you want a record. And I was like, oh, well, that happened.
Well, I think it really comes across as a whole piece. In other words, I think some of the themes on the record just really struck me. I wasn't expecting it when I first heard it. Amy Grant's got a new song. I think I saw you on one of the morning shows and they played the song. And then I was like, my gosh, that's so good. And I know your friend wrote 6th of January and you were performing that. And I was thinking, so finally heard the full album, and then just every song. First of all, melodically, it's great. Mac and everybody you worked with did a wonderful job on this, but it hit on all the themes that I know women of my age and your age want to hear people sing about. And nobody's really doing that. I think about when Bonnie Raitt put out Nick of Time. That was a little bit earlier in her career, but this is like your Nick of Time. I really think that it's that album that has all these sort of true stories in it about life and relationships. And then it just sort of all works as a whole. as well. So congratulations on that aspect of it. But I wanted to ask you too about the themes on the record treading the line of not taking political sides, but trying to present themes and issues as something that we can all work on together. I mean, I just saw Bruce Springsteen a couple weeks ago. I've been into all the people who are doing their protest songs and doing the songs that socially feel like they matter. But this record feels like it socially matters. So what do you think about how you wove those in?
I think I was writing to speak to myself. And you said something a minute ago, women our age. And I do feel like there's a perspective that comes after your families have, kids have grown up and launched. And, right now I feel like my memory might not be great, but my problem solving skills and how I process things, just because of the time that I've lived, you realize everything takes longer than you think it is going to take, you know? And so even thinking about how do we fix a situation? Well, it comes with incremental change that's consistently done. I mean, that's true for all of us individually. And I think, all of our perspectives are unique, but I do see the importance of community. I know it in my own life. And I wasn't thinking this when I was writing the songs, but I look back on it and go, just instinctively, I was appealing to community and trying to encourage each one of us of the power of our own choice. Like we actually can affect our culture every day by making eye contact with people who are different than we are, by asking a simple question, may I help you? Changing the world is not about proclaiming or grand gestures. Change happens because incremental investment is done in a conscientious way every day. And that's what I find in my life. My whole health journey has been about incremental change and seeing incremental results over years. And it's like, I appreciate an overnight purchase and something that's going to arrive at my front door, but none of that is real life. I mean, it's something. It's part of our lives. It's part of our culture, but that's not sustainable in our everyday expectations of how can I be different in the world? How can I show up differently? How can I impact? How can I exist in a way that is not soul-sucking, but actually I feel that I'm a part of the world around me and engaging in a way that's constructive. Yeah.
Maybe that the me that remains, you touched upon the incremental change and also patience, because it's not about a record deal or somebody rushing you through, you got to get another number one, you've got to do this. It represents those incremental things. And each song is kind of an incremental thing that you put together for this. I want to talk about being Southern too. I think that Southern women can sometimes face different problems than others. And just coming from the perspective of growing up in the Bible Belt, I know you were born in Augusta, but, moved to Nashville at a very young age and grew up in Tennessee and went to Furman a little while and went to Vanderbilt. But the idea of being in what I call the Bible Belt and growing up in a time when there was a lot of change, especially in music, that how music was presented, what was godly, what wasn't godly. And then your transition from your initial music that you were putting out in the late 70s and then kind of reaching that pinnacle with your number one pop hit in 91, Baby Baby. And then your next couple of phases too, I feel like there's not even a discussion now to put a label on this music at all. And maybe it's been that way for a while. I'm more of a Billboard person myself, so I haven't been steeped in CCM or kept up with that as a whole, just with the music that kind of seeps into your life, like your music has done since I think very early on remembering hearing about you. But the music that doesn't have a label. And so when I'm listening to this album, I hear things that are definitely feel like a praise song to me or feel like a prayer to me, couched next to something that could be like a big pop hit or, and that's, I think, a testament to what you're trying to do or be. How has your music changed you?
Wow, how has my music changed me? Well, I do think things that we return to over and over again in our lives do have an effect on us. And I've had the unique experience of writing or singing somebody else's song from the time I was a teenager. I'm 65. But like returning to themes in music, it's time to do a tour. Well, I got to do that song from the 80s, got to do that song from the 90s. But to return to a theme, it becomes part of, it's like what you speak all the time. Words do become part of us. It's kind of like if you want to exhibit some change, if you want your life to exhibit a change, you can't do everything the same always and expect anything to be different. And in the same way that, change involves risk on some level to do something differently. Well, now I'm going to say the exact opposite of that. Things that you that you consistently return to, I think, become so embedded in your DNA. It just becomes part of your root system. And my early music was faith music. I grew up on all the great singer-songwriters, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, Carole King, John Denver, early Elton John, just like, everybody's a great songwriter. The Beatles, Lennon McCartney, but all that, man, songs just represent everything in life. And I just started singing about faith because all the music that I loved, nobody was talking about their spiritual journey. And every person is mind, body, and spirit. The Beatles did some, everybody did some, but at the time in the mid 70s, I started going to a hippie church in Nashville because my two older sisters started going there. And so it was so different from religious culture of the South. But it was so alive experientially. But it was, blue jeans, barefoot, flower in people's hair, singing spontaneously, making up their own songs. And I just thought, I want to add to the repertoire of singer-songwriters with this message. I didn't grow up with gospel music. I didn't grow up with contemporary Christian music. I guess it was just emerging. But I've always loved all kinds of music. And so, but for me to have in my repertoire, if somebody's coming to a show, to have those early songs, no matter what was going on in my life, success, failure, overwhelmed, hopeful, I kept singing. It's like the hymns I grew up singing in church. That's like my earliest musical DNA. And those messages keep returning to you, and they shape how you see the world. They shape how you see yourself. They shape how you see God. And then, for every one of us, every chapter in life has its unique details wherever we are in life. The college years, the young adult years, the family years, parenting, jobs, more education. It's like, and through every one of those chapters, it's like, well, wish I hadn't done that. Well, I totally botched that. Well, I sure learned something. And everybody's life is that, just layer upon layer upon layer of experience. And here in my mid 60s, if I feel like I get to be a quiet witness to my life and other people's lives, and just go, I see that. I see that. I can't see it all, but I'm curious to look at other people's lives, knowing their life is just as full as mine is.
Well, what you touched upon, music being in the DNA, it is definitely something that nobody can take away from you, especially with people who have a career in music, those things come and go, the material aspects, the fame, these or that, but the music is there. The music is always there. So can we talk about some songs specifically? The 6th of January has gotten a lot of publicity, but I was really struck by your appearance with PS22 and when y'all were singing the How do we get there from here? I loved that, and about that time, I think I was, corresponding with the publicist and I was like, I have to talk to Amy Grant. I just love what they do and what they did with that song.
Yes.
What was that like?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is kind of crazy, but a woman who has been a fan of my music for quite some time. Anyway, her name's JJ, and she reached out to my manager. I've never had a cup of coffee with JJ. I've never had a meal with her, but she reached out to my manager and said, I have a very strong feeling Amy should sing this song with this school group. I'd never seen any of those PS22 Staten Island recordings, but Jennifer Cook, my manager, said, this is so crazy. I've got a call this afternoon with a publicist. And so she said, I'll bring it up. And when she called the publicist says, I've got a call with PS22 this afternoon. I'll pitch Amy in that song. And so that's why, like, the whole idea of community, of welcoming other people's thoughts, of welcoming other people's ideas, it's like, it just makes life feel like endless possibilities. What if that person has an idea that actually would benefit a lot of us? What if, and just yesterday first off, when I went to PS22 and the music teacher there was so vibrant, it just gave me so much appreciation for and hope for great teachers. That is not an easy job. I made friends with a woman in a checkout line at the grocery store. We just struck up a conversation, and she moved away from Nashville, and I reached out to her and told her about my experience with this public school teacher. And she is English as a second language teacher, and she said, "Whew, I've got to take some time off because it's so tough for her. The teachers are so underpaid. The system is so broken." It's just like, so you kind of have to hold it all. This one PS22 on Staten Island is knocking it out of the park, where other schools are, the best teachers are leaving because that environment is unsustainable. And you just have to go, okay, take a deep breath, incremental changes. But just hearing those kids sing those lyrics, and the teacher said, I want these words to be in them. I want this to be part of their toolkit. I was like, where?
Well, it's so powerful because wasn't the song inspired by the school shooting in Nashville?
Yes,
So
3 years ago.
When they sing the no, that is so powerful. I just broke
Yes.
down when I saw that. I was like,
Yeah.
even if I hadn't known that it was you or that it was on your record or whatever, it was just, I'm so glad you got to do that. And
yes, me too.
and part of that, they're musical ministers, in my opinion, those little kids. Beautiful Lone Companion. I haven't heard the origin story of that one yet.
I heard Beautiful Lone Companion as a slightly different song, titled differently, but Mike Reed had come to work in our studio here at the house. Mike Reed, professional NFL player turned songwriter, and he wrote, along with Alan Shamblin, Bonnie Raitt's I Can't Make You Love Me. I mean, what a great songwriter. And he was here at the house working with Vince, and Mike and I struck up a conversation. And before he left, he said, can I play you a song? And I think he just played a recording on his phone, just playing piano and singing. And I was so undone by that song. And I said, may I have a copy of that? And for, 5 years, I listened to that song. I reached out to him and said, this song, it is so beautiful. Is there any chance you would let me change some of the lyrics? And he said, no, because the journey through a song, you have one time through a song. I have heard that song many times. It just piqued my curiosity. It made my mind go a million different places. But knowing how much music there is in the world, to go, you have one listen to a song. And I said, can I slightly redirect that song and create a very creative framework? So nobody's having to find their way through that song. It needs to be so clear. And anyway, I was singing for a private function in Southern California, and I woke up with a different way to rewrite the first verse and rewrite the title of that song. Yeah, and contrary to what Mike Reed asked of me, I performed the song, and then I felt like dirt. And the next day I texted him and I said, "Did what you asked me to not do," and I rewrote it, and this is what I wrote, and I changed the title, and I didn't hear from him for hours. Of course, I was flying from LA to Nashville, and then a few hours went by, and he said, I believe this is what the song always wanted to be, which was just such a beautiful openness on his part. And he said, would you be my co-writer? He said, this song never would have seen the light of day, Amy. It would have been buried. I don't know why I even played it for you. And so that was 7 years ago. Yeah. And he just said, Amy, I just wouldn't let it die. And then he let me be the delivery system. And that recording is the scratch vocal. That was just what we did. I had to fix a couple of, notes that were not great in the bridge, but I have loved that song. I love how to me, it takes your imagination about what if. And it's just like a fireworks show. And to me, there's so many things, how the presence of love exhibits in the world. There's so many ways that we compartmentalize that with religious language. We compartmentalize it by saying, you're not on my team. We don't have on the same jersey. And I just feel like the nugget of Mike's song was such a beautiful expression of that. And that presence of love is available to everyone, everywhere, without asking. It's there. It already is. And I just love being able to sing a song that I feel like is sort of mind-opening.
Music is the only thing that people really enjoy in community. When you have a large gathering, it's sports, it's other competitions,
Right.
and music is really, and of course, religious worship, but even that is usually around music. So there you go. I wanted to ask you about your working relationship with Vince. I saw a clip the other day, I guess. Were y'all singing Friend Like You? And it was somewhere. I saw something on the internet I go by.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
how has this record, maybe other than different things you may have worked on over the many years, has this changed your kind of working relationship? Has him even being around you when you're making this, has that kind of changed the vibe of anything around the music making family?
Well, there is not a day that goes by that Vince does not have his hands on a guitar. And so I'm surrounded by music all the time. He is such a prolific songwriter. We have a studio in our home that's right across the hall from our bedroom. I hear music all the time. And to me, that's very soul satisfying. How we write, what's good to us is different. What moves us is different. My approach to almost everything is give me a roll of duct tape and a ball of twine, we'll make it work. And he is such a perfectionist. And also our reservoirs of creativity, he is so driven to pour all of that into music. And for me, my creative resources go so many different places. I love creating spaces for experiences to happen. That can be in the loft of the barn. Right now, I'm using so much energy. It's been really on my bucket list to execute successfully a garden that I start from beginning to end based on a 1971 book by an author named Ruth Stout called The No Work Garden, which is a total misnomer. But, so my creative energy goes so many different places. And then I will return to music, always for live performance. But I have not returned to songwriting in a consistent way in a decade until a couple of summers ago. And so I guess my relationship with Vince is that he keeps music in our home, and I'm so inspired by him. But I hope you hear this in a way that doesn't sound like false modesty, but sounds like the truth. I am not a dialed in enough singer to be hired as a background singer on Vince's tour. He is growing up in that bluegrass world. Everything, it's all about perfection. It's all about, his ears are so finely tuned. He is like a machine. Every time he opens his mouth, And like when and I have worked in the studio with Vince, and it's some of the best stuff I've ever done. But that is, it gets a little exhausting for me because perfection is not what matters to me. And so that was what was so great about working with Mac. Mac would say, I don't care if you're hitting the notes. I want to believe what you're singing. And so it's just like, and Mac and Vince are old friends. And it was like, oh my gosh, this just all happened at the right time. Like Vince can be holding an instrument, and I'm just saying how we're different. And somebody will say, will you play along with me? Or will you record something with me? Well, he's playing along when it first starts. He's listening and responding. He's had producers say, that was good. And he went, that was the first run through. I was just discovering the song, but how he instinctively responds is so exquisite. I was supposed to sing a song of Mac McAnally's when he was being honored in Nashville. It took me a week to learn a song I already knew. Like I had to like music is actually hard work for me. Even the songs I've written, I have to learn how to play. I know it sounds so back-ass words, but it's true. I have to work so hard to execute what I hear in my head and what I feel in my heart. And it's just the way I'm wired, kind of whoop.
How does it feel to be, but how does it feel to be in Atlanta? At least you're going to be performing at Eddie's Attic. I'm sure you performed there many times.
Think so. My daughter she sings, and she just opened a gig for Tennille Townes just, I think, last month at Eddie's Attic. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be playing where you play.
It's so intimate. And so I know people are very excited. I think it sold out in like 3 seconds or something like that. But
yeah, and this tour is different for me. I mean, I tour 80 shows a year. I've never stopped touring except for during COVID and when I was in some recovery for something. But this tour is unlike anything I've done in a long time. There are 4 of us on stage. And so we're all having to change what we play, what we sing, just to try to communicate the songs. We're really trusting the songs. And so no bells and whistles. And that feels like a sort of an intimate setting that I haven't done in the context of a tour. I went and sang with a guitar and a friend of mine playing keyboards at Grammys when the record came out. But to actually do a tour like this, we're going to be learning as we go.
It's very exciting. Well, congratulations on the album. And
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us for Georgia Public Broadcasting. And I hope to see you at Eddie's Attic.
All right. I hope so too. I'll see you then, Kristi. Thank you.
Take care. The Sweet Song Podcast is hosted by Kristi York Wooten, that's me, and produced by Sustenance Group, LLC. Special thanks to this week's guest. Be sure to check out full episodes wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe and like on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Visit Pure Pop for Now, people, for more information, and we'll see you next week.